Better Call Saul is arguably my favorite piece of media in like the entire world of fiction. There's a couple of video games I'd say maybe come close. Red Dead Redemption 2 immediately comes to mind, but as far as film and TV goes, Better Call Saul is my favorite. When I say fiction, the entire world of fiction, storytelling and visually, and that's a whole separate video if I were to explain why. But it'll be a damn long video too. But just to preface this video, which you can already tell is by the title, is a character ranking. You should know where I'm coming from as far as approaching this show on a critical level. It is my number one favorite piece of fiction out there. As such, you can imagine none of these characters I think in the show are anything below average. But I always thought it would be a fun and kind of challenging exercise to approach this show on a more critical level than I have in the past. If you look at my other videos that I've done on Better Call Saul, they're mostly like appreciation videos, But a video like this is kind of one I've wanted to make for a while, like ranking things and comparing elements of the show to each other. I wanted to make a video like ranking all the seasons, for example. I just kind of want to lay out where I'm coming from with this video. There's going to be a lot of personal bias attached, but I think it'll be a fun time. So strap in. And also, you should know that not every single character in the show is on this list. I tried to pick, obviously the main characters, but as far as supporting characters go, I tried to pick characters that at least appeared in more than one episode and had something above, like, a very minor role in that specific episode. For example, like Fred Whalen, and by extension, the librarian who saw Fred Whalen, who Mike interviewed later, they're both not on this list. For example, that's the kind of where I'm coming from. Like, super minor characters like that who didn't have a ton to like contribute to the show aside from moving the plot forwards are not really present. I'm trying to include characters in this list where I can chart, something of an arc, something of material, to talk about beyond just like, oh yeah, they showed up in this episode and they were great, Anyway, let's start with Don Eladio.
A la chingada con Eladio.
Okay, let's do Juan Bolsa then.
Con bolsa y
Okay.
contigo.
What? Alright, fine. Just for that, Hector, we're doing you first. Hector Salamanca is a character who actually, on my very first watch of the show, I did kind of think that his potential was wasted a little bit in the show, and it was one of, like, the only minor criticisms I had. I was like, wow, I wish we could have seen Hector a little bit longer before he got into the wheelchair. But the more that I think about it and the more that I've assessed his character arc on, each rewatch of the show, I kind of see his character really is about, an example of how deep and how far the Salamanca roots go in the cartel, and kind of how Gus, came along and just really drove a wedge in everything. Well, Hector drove the wedge, if we're being honest, but Gus's addition to the world of the Salamancas is such a threat to Hector and a threat to Gus later in the show, but Hector's character I did appreciate a lot more, I'd say. The more we got to see how deep the world of the Salamancas really go, and how it really shows you that in Breaking Bad all it took was this fucking chemistry teacher showed up and just screwed everything up,
This whole thing, all of this, it's all about me.
As far as Hector goes, I think he was a great character. I think there was a lot of physical acting to the role pre and post wheelchair in the show that Mark Margolis like knocked out of the park, honestly. So yeah, I think he was a great addition to the show. I would say a B. Okay, so next up we have Arturo. Arturo is okay. He never really contributed much to the show. I don't think. He was just kind of a body to be standing opposite Nacho to make the shots more symmetrical. I would say Arturo is probably one of the weaker links of the show. But again, remember where I'm coming from on this. I love Better Call Saul. It's not like Arturo's a bad character. He serves his purpose, but his purpose in the show was to kind of be, insignificant. And at the end of the day, he just amounted to an example for Gus to make out of him to show Nacho. As soon as he started yapping in the, when they were getting the drugs, when they were exchanging the drugs, in that scene before Arturo dies, and Arturo kind of had a lot to say in that scene, and it was more than he kind of said any time else in the show. And in my head, I was like, this guy better go out, huh? And then, a couple minutes later, he just goes out.
That's how you do it. We had them pissing their pants.
So, I'd say C, which as you can see, C is kind of the lowest I'm going on this tier list. So, you know, still average. All right, we got the Kettlemans up next. I'm gonna do Betsy and Craig. There's a couple here that I'm gonna kind of like lump together. Betsy and Craig being one of like kind of rank as one character because you know they had their little brief appearance in season 6, but they were really season 1 characters, and what made them work was kind of their dynamic together. The Kettlemans are an entertaining addition to the show. I would say it's above average for sure, just because of how like exaggerated each of them play their roles. You know, Craig, like the whipped husband who like can't say anything, and there's a lot of great acting to the role. You know, especially in his appearance in season 6 when they're like talking with Cliff and he's enthusiastically preparing his cup of coffee and then can't drink it because Betsy drags him out. The way their characters work together, in my opinion, was what made them so entertaining. I think if we were presented with only one of these character types in the show, that person wouldn't really have worked as well. It really is about the dynamic as a couple. Betsy, I love Betsy Kettleman. I love to hate her. You know what I mean? She's a great addition. I would put both of those characters in B. All right, next up we have, oh wow, and I'm realizing this is like the only one where I use like the actress's picture instead of them in the show, I think. Oops, that was not intentional. But Cheryl Hamlin, I initially was not going to include Cheryl in this list because her role is very minor. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know, her role is kind of critical to the show. You know, I mean, she's present not only in the Better Call Saul in the in the Jimmy McGill timeline, but also in one of the final episodes of the series. You know, so something has to, you know, that deserves some kind of recognition. That being said, her character is kind of one-dimensional. She serves her purpose, you know, much like many of the other characters on the show, but she does kind of come in a little too late into the series for me to really like care about her much as a character. She's more of a plot device, you know. She's more of a character for Jimmy and Kim to kind of see and like personify their guilt after Howard got iced in front of them. You know, she's kind of someone for Kim to have like come across and realize the gravity of what her and Jimmy had really done. And then at the end, she was the one that Kim would, you know, unload her guilty conscience on. I think she's a fine character, and she was acting well, written well, but doesn't serve a ton to the show beyond moving the plot forward. That being said, the part of the plot that she did move forward was very significant. So for that one reason, I'm going to put her as a B. Otherwise, I would have said C, honestly. Okay, Chuck McGill, Charles McGill. Listen, one of the videos I wanted to make about this show is a whole video deconstructing Chuck as a character. I think Chuck is one of the most complex, most complicated, most three-dimensional characters ever put to screen in a movie or a TV show ever. He's a huge part of why I love the show so much. So I'm going to try to refrain from like going in depth about Chuck right now because I do want to make a video later, and this video is going to be already long enough ranking all these characters. So Chuck is a perfect example of perspective, of point of view. You know, I've always said this about Chuck's character, that if the show Better Call Saul was told from Chuck's point of view, we would absolutely see Jimmy as the antagonist. Chuck is the only character in the show who truly sees Jimmy for who he actually is. Chuck's known Jimmy the longest. You know, Howard realizes that a little bit too late at the end when he tells Kim.
You know who really knew Jimmy? Chuck.
You know, and that being said, Chuck also went about his actions in a horrible way. You know, I think, you know, I'm going to put Chuck S tier. And I'm going to make a video eventually explaining why I love Chuck so much as a character. But just for the purpose of this ranking, you should know that I think that a huge part of the reason I love this show so much is because of Chuck and Jimmy's relationship, how Chuck's illness, you know, manifests itself in relation to Jimmy's successes and failures in his own life. You know, that there's a lot to love about Chuck, I think. That being said, you know, I don't say love as in like, yeah, go Chuck, but it's fuck Chuck, but he's a great character. So yeah, S tier. All right, next up we have Crazy 8. I also really wasn't going to include him on the list at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know, he did kind of play a significant role in like the first half of season 5. You know, he was the initial client to get Jimmy into the world of the cartel, so I think for that reason he kind of deserves to be on the list. That being said, he doesn't really add much. He is kind of like a plot device to move things forward. He's kind of like the character to kind of merge Jimmy's worlds of like the law and the cartel, and he does kind of advance the plot in that way. As a character in the show, I don't care for his inclusion all that much. And it's kind of a nice little touch to see how he got the name Crazy 8.
Mucho loco, this guy, huh?
That was more of like a fan service moment than anything else and didn't say much about his character. So I'm going to put him as a C. That being said, he was pretty entertaining, on screen, I would say. All right, Cliff Main. So Cliff really kind of is a major player in season 2 and season 6 of the show, and that's kind of about it. His role in the show was a pretty decent one, I would say. There's nothing about Cliff that really stands out to me and jumps out at me and speaks to me about his character. But I think that it was a good idea really to bring him back in season 6, especially because of how everything goes down with Howard and how his character needs to serve that purpose of a little bit of skepticism versus his perception of Howard in those final episodes of the show really kind of make that downfall and make the way that whole plan and execution a lot more tragic. So Cliff as a character I think did pretty well, and I would probably give him a B. I would say, I don't know, I don't have much to say about Cliff really. All right, we got Dr. Caldera up next, the veterinarian. This guy I'm giving an S tier for the simple reason that he is an animal lover above all else. That scene with him in season 6 where he explains why he does what he does is probably the most heartwarming scene in that whole show.
Look over there. See that? That's what it's all about. Animals are my life. It's this other stuff. It's getting to be too much. No offense.
So yeah, S tier. I'm not kidding in the slightest. All right, we got Erin up next. Erin is she's kind of a humorous character. She's kind of there to be a bit of comedic relief. I liked her. I don't really have a bunch to say about her. I also was there's a lot of characters I wasn't gonna include on this list initially, but then I kind of realized I do need to include a lot of these more minor and insignificant characters so I can balance out this list because not a lot of not a lot of variety if I would have only included the main players. So Erin, I'm going to give her a B. She was nice. Her screen time was enjoyable. I liked every scene she was in. She served her purpose as a humorous addition to the show. All right, up next. All right, up next we have Francesca. Francesca might be one of the biggest surprises to me of the whole show. As far as which characters they brought back from Breaking Bad, there were some of the obvious ones we knew would be popping up, but I wasn't sure if we'd see Francesca. I think the show could have also worked without her, but her inclusion in this series was one of the most pleasant surprises to me because she's not only a big part of the Jimmy storyline, but she's a big part of the Gene storyline later on as well, post Breaking Bad. And it was kind of tragic to see, how she starts out as this bubbly secretary for Jimmy and Kim, and then she still tries to retain that piece of herself when she works for Saul later, even though she doesn't want to. And then you just kind of see how the job eventually breaks her. And she was a really great character. I did not expect when she showed up in season 3. It was season 3, right? Yeah, when she showed up in season 3 to work for Jimmy and Kim, I was really surprised, and I was like, oh, is she gonna be around for a while? Is this a cameo? What is this? And then I really appreciate how the writers brought her into this prequel series without making it feel like fan service. She does feel like an integral part of the show, and for that reason, I'm going to give her an A, actually. All right, next up, Gustavo Fring, the Chicken Man.
This is the best chicken I have ever had.
I'm delighted to hear that.
I mean, what really can I say about Gus, right? Here's the thing, in Breaking Bad, we see a much more different Gus than we see in Better Call Saul. This show really allows you to see Gus in a more expanded kind of light. In Breaking Bad, you see him as the cold, calculating, the silent. He's always right, always methodical. He's this imposing force of nature in Breaking Bad. But in Better Call Saul, you kind of see a more human side to him. You see this paranoid side to him who, towards the end of the show in season 6, this guy is fearing for his life. I mean, Lalo, the mere fact that Lalo is out there is freaking Gus out. You don't see this side of Gus in Breaking Bad. And in here you get to see how his relationship with Mike begins. You get to see his antagonism with Hector is more fleshed out. When Better Call Saul was first starting out, a lot of people were not sure about, is this show really going to work, So, of course, by now everyone knows the show's quality and everyone knows the show's amazing, but when the show was first coming out, people were a little skeptical of it, and admittedly, it does take a while for this show to really heat up and get to the point of, intensity that Breaking Bad eventually reaches. But Gus's inclusion in the show could have gone south, but because the series is so amazing as a whole, it did not feel forced. It did not feel like fan service. I'm not going to give him an S tier. You know, I don't want to kind of overhype it, but I am going to give him an A. So actually, my opinion on Gus's ranking has kind of changed. I mean, looking back, and especially while editing this video and this part of the video, and especially finding all the Gus clips and like kind of refreshing my memory here, I think Gus really is an S tier character. For whatever reason, while making the video, I just was too, I don't know, I didn't want to give him an S tier for whatever reason. Couldn't really tell you why. But maybe I was in denial about his greatness or something. But no, really, looking back on here, I don't have anything to complain about with Gus whatsoever. You know, I don't think it's overhyping it to put him at an S tier. I think for all the reasons I already listed that he would be an A, you know, because of us getting to see a whole different angle to him in this show. I think that's all the more reason actually to bump him up to an S tier. You know, the fact that we were able to see this entirely brand new side to Gus in this show that we hadn't seen in Breaking Bad. And, you know, I feel like I wanted to give him an S tier while filming, but maybe for whatever reason, can't put my finger on it, just didn't want to overhype it like I was saying. But no overhyping here. This man's an S tier. Howard Hamlin, easily the most tragic character in the entire show. That's who we got up next. I'm really torn between an S and an A on this one, because here's the thing with Howard's character is that I do think Howard is a pretty interesting character from the start. I've heard opinions from a lot of people that do say that Howard never really got interesting until season 6. I disagree with that. I think Howard is a pretty interesting character from the start. That being said, the writers gave him a lot more character depth in season 6. Like, you know, his arc was kind of like boom, 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 and then just like boom, skyrocketed. And so I don't know if I kind of tell myself that if Howard was given this much more depth in the earlier parts of the show before season 6, maybe he'd be an S tier. But I think I'm going to put him at A, because he does, I mean, he's the most tragic character in the whole show. He's kind of like the voice of reason almost for certain. You know, his interactions with Chuck, with Jimmy, with Kim, with everyone, you kind of see how he's a lawyer at heart. He wants to, you know, he wants to keep HHM together. He's kind of focused on the job, but at the same time, there's a very human side to him. You know, there are scenes like, for example, when he's talking with Kim, you know, about, well, things work out the way they should, I suppose. You know, that seems pretty heavy. When he's at the end, he's talking to the new intern, and he's, you know, saying maybe there are more important things than being the greatest legal mind ever known. I do like Howard as a character, but I'm not going to give him an S, just because he's not given the same level of depth and attention and detail that all the other characters that are eventually, you know, we haven't gotten to a lot of these major players yet. That S tier is probably going to fill up. But, you know, you'll see the characters in the S tier. And let's be honest, Dr. Caldera, that was... I stand by putting them in the S tier, but he's an animal lover. He's got to be an S. But my point is that if he was given the same level of depth in season, you know, in the entire show that he was in season 6, he'd be an S for sure. Huel Babineau, he's up next. He was a good addition to the show, I think. Entertaining, served his purpose. You know, you see me saying that a lot, but a lot of these recurring characters from Breaking Bad that are in Better Call Saul are kind of there to serve a purpose, and which is not a bad thing at all, because they're integrated well. But, you know, I wouldn't say that Huel's inclusion in this show reached the heights of, like, Francesca's, for example, you know? Huel did always feel like just fan service, which is not bad, and he was integral to the plot in certain scenes, but I'm just going to put him at a B, you know? Well, even a B seems a bit too fair. Honestly, yeah, I'm just going to put him at a C. He was average. I liked seeing him. It was fun, but not integral. Irene Landry, probably the character that, besides Howard, got done like the dirtiest in this entire show. What Jimmy did to her, whew, crazy, man. But Irene, again, this is another case of I almost left her off the list, but I kept her on just because of how integral to certain scenes or a certain aspect of the plot she is. But I am going to put her as a C. You know, she is a plot device as a character. You know, she served as this person for Jimmy to kind of do his worst on, you know, and it worked, and you do feel for Irene. And later on in the season, when Jimmy finally makes up for it by telling the truth to everybody, it's like heartwarming to see Irene kind of reunite with her friends and also finally tell Jimmy off. So I mean, I liked Irene's inclusion in the show. Season 6 as well, she kind of did what she needed to do, but she never went above average to me. So I'm going to put her at a C. All right, pretty obvious where this character is going to end up. Jimmy McGill, Saul Goodman, Gene Takovic. Yeah, I mean, what can I really say about Jimmy? You know, that wouldn't require like an entire video to just talk about him. I mean, Jimmy is why this show is so great. The Better Call Saul is a show about choices, about consequences, about, you know, the choices you make. puts you on a path. You know, the world of Better Call Saul is so rich and so vibrant because of, you know, because of its themes. And Jimmy is the core element that makes all this work. You know, what other character would you, you know, read or hear or see defecate through a sunroof and you'd still root for him? You know, Bob Odenkirk's acting is phenomenal in this. This is, I think of Bob Odenkirk and I think of Saul Goodman. You know, I think of Jimmy McGill. Jimmy is proof that, you know, characters are not black and white. People are not black and white. You know, there can be horrible things about somebody and great things about somebody. You know, he's really is my favorite. I say Better Call Saul is my favorite piece of fiction out there, and Jimmy McGill is probably my favorite character in all of fiction. You know, just because of how like layered and three-dimensional of a character he is. We really benefit from seeing some of the younger sides of Jimmy in the show and some of the older. The fact that we really get to see Jimmy across like almost his entire life or his entire adult life in this show in this show is why his character works as well as it does. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, he did what he did for love, and you know, I could talk about Jimmy forever, man. But maybe I'll make a video one day. Probably when I make the Chuck video, I'll talk about Jimmy too. But you know, for now, just obviously S tier. All right, Kevin Wachtel. Kevin is I like Kevin. Kevin is another one of those serves his purpose kind of characters, and you know, as far as Mesa Verde, nothing about Mesa Verde is like really interesting. You know, I'm not like floored by Kevin as a character, but the acting that is brought to the role is really great. You know, Kevin's like signature sitting pose or whatever. I don't even know what he does. I'd have to like, I don't even know. What do you sit like this or something? I don't know, man. Or sits like sideways.
He sits like that.
Yeah, he sits to the side.
He's a side sitter.
And his voice, and you know, and I'm Kevin Wachtel, and I'm gonna build my branch of bank wherever I freaking want to, you know. But
I'm not gonna let him deprive me. No sirree. Kim, I need it sooner than yesterday. Got it?
But Kevin.
No, you do whatever it takes. I don't like waiting one bit. Never have, never will. Bottom line.
I would put him as a B for that reason. That's why he's elevated above average, because at the end of the day, he is, you know, there in a lot of the scenes to be an example of why Kim hates being this kind of corporate lawyer, you know. So I'm gonna put him at a B. Oh man, Werner Ziegler. He's probably the biggest surprise, one of the biggest surprises of the show for me. You know, when I was, you know, starting season 4, I wasn't really expecting to see the birth of the Super Lab in this show. You know, it's not something I ever really thought about. So it's kind of a cool surprise to get to see like the origins of Gus's Super Lab in the show. But I never expected to care this much about like the crew that put the Super Lab together. Or they're not even the ones who did it. They just blew the whole up. You know, Ziegler is one of the best characters in the entire show, even though he's only in it for one season. You know, I don't know if I'd put him an S because of that, just because he is in one season, but for the time that he's on screen, he leaves an impression. And a lot of that does have to do with what his relationship with Mike means for Mike's character going forward. You know, a lot of Ziegler's purpose as a character is to have this lasting effect on Mike later, but man, does it work. I mean, like, come on.
There are so many stars visible in New Mexico. I will walk out there to get a better look.
Ziegler it's one of the most heartbreaking arcs of the entire show, and it's a testament to one of the best parts of the show, which is the writing. You know, the writers sometimes in this show, Better Call Saul is kind of a tragedy at the end of the day, you know, and the writers sometimes throughout this series hit you with some like absolute blows to the chest, and this is one, and Ziegler's arc is one of them, but it's just not, it's so well executed that I can't help but admire it as a writer. You know, like as a writer, what you want to be able to like write these devastating and like kind of emotionally gut-wrenching scenes without it seeming, you know, with it seeming real, with it seeming that it works. And Ziegler's arc is a testament to that, I think. So A, easy A. All right, Kim Wexler, easy S tier. Kim Wexler is not only like my favorite female character in all of television, but probably one of my favorite characters, period, in all of television. She's an amazing, very, very well-developed character. You know, watching the series for the first time, seeing her and Jimmy's relationship develop, you know, I think everyone who watches this show for the first time goes through a few different emotions with Kim's character. They probably go from thinking, you know, in the season 1 and season 2 arcs, they probably start by thinking, oh no, do her and Jimmy like break up? And then, you know, throughout seasons 3 and 4, you might start thinking, oh my God, did she just maybe just like die or something? Is that why she's not in Breaking Bad? And then you go from thinking that to then you watch seasons 5 and 6, and first timers are probably like, oh my God, she's probably like alive and well in Breaking Bad, huh? Like the trajectory of her character is so subtly executed up until it builds to that boiling point in season 5. But I just absolutely love the pacing and the structure of Kim's like slow descent and then redemption. Rewatching the show, you really, really do see that Kim's Giselle side, the Giselle side of Kim was there from the start. From the start. There is the couple flashbacks to Kim's childhood that we see later in the show, which kind of does tell you right there. Those flashbacks tell you that it was there from the start. But then when you rewatch the show, you really can see. In season 1, when she has these subtle smiles to Jimmy's antics, to season 2.
This whole thing was a publicity stunt. It's got to be. You don't think anyone's going to actually buy this?
Hard to say. People love a hero.
But through it all, the love for each other is there. Jimmy and Kim really did love each other, I think. Or not did, they do. They do love each other. And it's a beautiful show because of that, man. Kim is another one of those characters I could spend forever talking about, but we got to move on. So, easy S tier. All right, we're getting to like the big guns now. I just had this randomized. I did put Hector first on purpose because I had that little skit planned out. But other than that, the characters on this list are randomized. So Lalo is going to be an easy S tier as well for me. Lalo Salamanca might be my favorite character in either show, in either Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. He's just like such a surprise character. The writers took this throwaway line from Breaking Bad and turned it into like one of the best characters ever put to screen. And a lot of that is because of Tony Dalton's performance, his charming kind of performance. But there's just so many like Laloisms that I just love. His singing and his energy, and he was such a wild card, such an unpredictable like force of nature in the show. You never knew what this guy was up to next, and I love him. I absolutely love him. But he was menacing too, man. Like Lalo meant business. I think his inclusion in this series was an excellent way to kind of bring Jimmy's worlds together as well, because when you think about it, Lalo really is the only one who could have brought Jimmy into this world. He had this charm to him as a criminal that Jimmy had as a lawyer. There was this sense of charm between the two that in season 5, when Lalo tries to recruit Jimmy, like that, he was probably the only one who could have made it work. Nacho threatening him might not really have worked as well. Who knows? Maybe it would have, but I think Lalo was the perfect character to kind of bring Jimmy into the cartel world as well. So, easy S tier. Manuel Varga, I'm probably going to give him a B. He's definitely above average, but I wouldn't say he made enough of an impression to be an A or an S tier. A lot of what makes Manuel Varga's character works is just his relationship with his son. And obviously, it's just by nature of the character not having as much screen time, but I didn't want to leave him off this list because he is a very important person to Nacho, and Nacho's a great character, so it felt almost disrespectful to not put Nacho's dad on the list, but I will give him a B. I liked his inclusion in the show, of course, but beyond like being that example to Nacho pretty much that he is in the show, giving Nacho something to like fight for, he doesn't do much else. He is just a shop owner, so B. Oh man, Marco. Marco is one of the most like underlooked characters in the whole show, I think. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I just pulled that one out of my ass. I don't really hear a lot of people talk about Marco. Marco is a very important person to Jimmy, man. How many scenes in the show do we see of close-ups of Jimmy, messing with Marco's ring like that? I think Marco is this perfect character to kind of like show Jimmy, he's the only one who really understood the Slippin' Jimmy part of Saul Goodman, of Jimmy McGill, of Gene Takovic. The Slippin' Jimmy part of all of that was with Marco, and you see how much that relationship means to Jimmy throughout the show, in those key moments where you see him mull over the ring on his finger, especially in the end when Gene takes it out, that you see how much that bond, that friendship means to Jimmy. And in season 1, Marco's death is one of the most like tragic scenes in the whole show, because you kind of do see it's coming. You see there's hints in that episode that tell you that it's coming, but even though you know that, it's just like damn. And you see the weight of that relationship and what it did to Jimmy, because you also see it as his cautionary tale. Jimmy sees this and is like, damn, like Marco kind of this was his entire life. Jimmy had to get back to his client and his lawyer and to being a lawyer, and Marco's like, nah, man, you don't need to do all that. Like, come to stay here. And Jimmy knows that as great and luxurious as this scamming life is, it can't be everything, you know? So I don't know, the importance of Marco's character is gonna, even though he really is only in like a couple episodes, I'm gonna give him an A, but seriously. Oh man, Mike Ehrmantraut. Obviously this guy's gonna get an S tier. Mike might be, aside from Jimmy, he might be the most like layered and three-dimensional character in the entire series. Mike's inclusion in Better Call Saul was almost a no-brainer, but the writers really took it to another level, man. Mike, you know, I don't want to, there's these characters, a lot of the ones that are putting the S tier, like I want to just dwell on and talk about forever, but the best thing I can say about Mike is he's just the focal point of a lot of the morality of this series. You know, Mike breaks bad just as much as Walter does, just as much as Saul does, just as much as Kim does, you know, just as much as Gus does. But Mike is one of the only characters in the show that has a conscious understanding of the decisions he's making at all times. You know, he knows that he has to play the cards he's dealt. He knows that the decisions that he's made throughout his life as a dirty cop, his relationship with Maddie, he knows that those decisions are what's landed him where he is now. And he knows that the best thing he can do for his family, if he wants to just make the money, is to play those cards he was dealt and work for Gus. And, you know, and he's the one who ends up explaining these kinds of themes to a lot of the other characters, you know, to Jimmy, to Kim, to Nacho, to frickin', what's the baseball card guy's name? I forgot him, or Mr. Wormold, who's not on this list. But without Mike, a lot of the morality of this show, it would work still, but Mike's character is just acting at the beating heart of it all, is one of the absolute best writing decisions that the creators that you know, that Gilligan and Gould could have made with this series. So easy S tier for Mike Ehrmantraut. These next couple, well, Everett Acker, he has a brief inclusion in season 5, and he kind of works to be this foil to Kim and by extension Mesa Verde. I included him in the list because his inclusion in the show is at a pivotal moment in Kim's, you know, morality or psyche, where she's really deciding, like, is Mesa Verde really what I want to do? Is this goddamn, like, do I really want to just help Kevin build a bank for the rest of my life? So I included him because of that, because his character does affect Kim a lot, and, you know, and eventually Jimmy's relationship with Kim as well. But as a standalone character, I think I'm just going to give him a C. He was executed well. He played the angry old man kind of type that he was supposed to, but above all that, not much. I'm going to give him a C. Same for Mrs. Nia Nguyen. Ooh, did I say her name right? I'm going to give her a C because she's entertaining, and I also, you know, it was kind of her dynamic with Jimmy was funny.
Cucumber water for customer only.
There were a couple of key moments in the show where I kind of enjoyed the screen time that her and Jimmy shared together, like when she gives Jimmy that liquor, or when she's like, get rich quick schemes never work. But she is kind of just average, you know, but entertaining, I bet. Probably one of the more entertaining C's on this list, I will say. Nacho Varga, another S tier, definitely. And it's really mostly because of his spirit as a character, first of all, his love for his dad, and why he does everything that he does for his dad. And he kind of exemplifies a lot of what I said about Mike as well, but on kind of like a less mature level. You know what I mean? Mike's lived his life. Mike's an old man and understands the choices and consequences side of things. Nacho does, and, you know, he tells himself he does, and he does what he does for his dad, and I promise I'm getting out soon. You know, Nacho has this mentality, but he's also sadly just out of his depth. You know, Nacho keeps getting himself into trouble throughout the course of the show, and it's just tragic. You know, it does build to one of probably the best deaths in the entire show when Nacho finally just lays it all out and goes out on his own terms and delivers one of the absolute best monologues I've ever heard on TV.
What else, Hector? I put you in that chair. You were dead and buried, and I had to watch this asshole bring you back. So when you are sitting in your shitty nursing home and you're sucking down on your Jell-O night after night for the rest of your life, you think of me. You twisted fuck.
The tragedy of Nacho is that he just kept digging himself a deeper and deeper hole because he kept doing what he did because he thought it was the right thing to finally get himself free. He's like, oh, if I take Hector down, there won't be any consequences. You know, Nacho couldn't think outside of his own kind of, tunnel vision. Mike was the one who constantly needed to remind him, like, listen, man, the things you're doing have consequences beyond what you can think of. And so it's a very tragic character arc, but it's honorable at the end when he goes out. I think he went out the best possible way he could. So yeah, man, S tier for sure. Bill Oakley, definitely one of the characters that's in here just for like comedic value. Even though I do appreciate how the writers brought him back for the post Breaking Bad arc to kind of bring everything home. Oh, it was pretty cool, but at the end of the day, even that was kind of just humorous. Bill Oakley as a character was always just kind of this character to play off of Jimmy in this funny, in this funny way. I don't think his character has a ton of depth to him. He's just the bald dude who likes to eat food and kind of a lame, a lame duck lawyer, but nothing bad about him at all. Absolutely. But I'm just going to give him a C. I want to give him a B, but just doesn't seem like fair just because I find him so funny. And at the end of the day, I think he is a C character, but that's not a bad thing by any means. I'm realizing now that I'm editing this video, for some reason I failed to mention one of like Bill's best scenes in the show. I just wanted to bring it up. It doesn't change his rating. I still think I'd keep him at a C. However, the scene where he judges Saul for defending Lalo at the courthouse, I think is one of the most standout and poignant scenes of the whole show, and definitely I think Bill's like best scene and one of the only non-comedic scenes that he's in that really has like a lasting effect, you know what I mean, and actually resonates. Yeah, doesn't change his rating, but I did just want to bring that up. It would feel incomplete if I left that moment out of his explanation. Anyway, Paige is also gonna get a C, whereas Kevin gets a B because of how much that role is like exaggerated and lived in. Paige is another one of those serves her purpose kind of characters, and she does kind of play as this, not a foil to Kim, she's a companion to Kim, and she's kind of the only person to show Kim that like there is a human side to like being a corporate lawyer or being a lawyer for this big bank. It's easy to see it all as just suits and all this, but Paige does like Kim as a friend, and Kim appreciates that relationship, but at the end of the day, Paige was also one of the ones to show Kim that this is not what she wants to do forever, that she doesn't want to just have to be under Paige and Kevin's thumb the whole time, so Paige is a good character. And you know what? No, I'll give her a B, just because of what I just said. She's with Kevin as a B. She doesn't deserve a C. Paige supremacy. Rebecca. Rebecca is a hard character to rank because I really like her just because of her relationship with Chuck that's kind of shown throughout the show. She kind of is an example of what Chuck could have had. Chuck had his own problem. Chuck likes to see himself as the man who is always right, but Chuck had his own ego and Chuck had his own problems, and lying to Rebecca about his illness was one of those really bad things that drove a wedge between them and drove them apart. And a big part of the reason I like Rebecca's character in the show is because of her inclusion in chicanery as well. How she's kind of brought in to be this like foil for the entire case, and Jimmy just uses her completely. And she's one of the only ones to really just tell Jimmy to his face like that what he did is kind of unfair and mean. When she's like, Chuck's mentally ill. What's your excuse? She's like, Chuck was right about you this whole time. So she's kind of this voice of reason in that way. It was a surprise initially to see her in his flash. I'm like, oh wow, Chuck had a girlfriend. Someone could actually love that guy. But that kind of does end up being the like point. Also, it's like someone could love that guy. Chuck is a human, and he did have this relationship and kind of fumbled it because of his own reasons. Which depending how far you want to go with how much of his illness was a mental illness. You can almost say that his relationship with Jimmy eventually drove him and Rebecca apart. She's a good inclusion in the show. I'm going to give her a B. Okay, these next two I'm actually going to rank together because Rich and Suzanne, yeah, I'm noticing they're next to each other. Otherwise, I would have done it separately. But since they're next to each other, I already know I'm going to give these characters both the same ranking. They're just average. They're both going to get C's. I like Rich as a character. I like Suzanne as a character. They both did what they needed to do in the show, but they were nothing more than just, kind of supporting characters. There's nothing about Rich that really stands out to me as a character, and there's nothing about Suzanne that stands out to me as a character. That being said, their interactions with the other characters, with Jimmy, with Kim, with Chuck, we're all good. Again, I love the show to death. C is like the baseline for greatness in this list. You know what I mean? So all these characters are well executed. Just obviously some are more interesting to me than others. And Rich and Suzanne were never really like interesting to me, So I'm going to put them both at a C. All right, Stacy is a very tough character also for me to rank, you know, because she is very important to Mike. Of course, obviously she's very important to Mike, but her character really does come down to just being somebody that Mike can support and provide for. It's really about the relationship that makes Stacy's character to work. You know, on her own, she kind of is like a broken record where she's always talking about her. I'm not knocking this at all, of course, I promise I'm not, but I'm just saying from a writing perspective, she really is just like goes between talking about Maddie to talking about money problems to talking about how paranoid she is about being safe. Her character might have been able to bring something more to the table, but at the same time, not all the characters in this show need to like be a part of all the aspects, the cartel and this, you know. Her scenes with Mike in season 1 were some of the best, I'd say, especially in 5-0 when Mike breaks down and talks about Maddie. So I'm going to give her a B. All right, and then we're almost done. So Tuco Salamanca, his inclusion in the show was a surprise, and it came early, of course. You see him in the last scene of the first episode of the show, but you know I didn't expect to see that. I'm starting Better Call Saul for the first time, and all of a sudden I see Tuco. Crazy. I think his inclusion in the show is definitely fan service above all else, but it was good fan service. The first 2 episodes of the show are like this great blueprint for Jimmy as a character, show you how good he is on the legal side of things, and show you how good he is as a negotiator. You know, it shows you a lot about his character. You know, and Tuco's scenes with Jimmy in that episode are rank among like my favorites in the entire series. You know, Tuco's inclusion is minor and it's fan service, but I'm inclined to give him a B, just above a C. He kind of deserves a C if I'm being honest, but I'm gonna give him a B personally, just because he was so damn entertaining. All right, and then these last 2 I'm also going to rank together, Victor and Tyrus, because they are definitely just fan service characters. Nothing more can really be said about them. You know, we know how Victor ends up in Breaking Bad. It's not, you know, I liked seeing them in the show. There's nothing wrong with them, but Tyrus really, I never really cared for Tyrus as a character myself, if I'm being, you know, honest. So that already as a baseline, he's one of my least favorite characters in the entire universe. So I'm just going to give them both a C, you know, average. They serve their purpose to just be there because we know they're part of Gus's team and they're just familiar faces, but that's it. And there we go. That's it. All Better Call Saul characters ranked. Almost all Better Call Saul characters ranked, you know? But you can see, I mean, the distribution, most of these characters I do find to be above average. You know, the average ones are mostly just because they don't serve a huge purpose to the plot beyond being just characters to, you know, to serve a plot point. You know, most of the ones on C are just not very like deep characters. The A and the S tiers are some of my favorite characters in all of television, you know. So I don't know if you guys agree, if you disagree, or, you know, let me know. Start a discussion in the comments. You know, thanks for watching this whole thing to the end. I'm sure this video is damn long. I know I filled up one SD card. The other one might be almost full too. I had to swap batteries already. Yeah, it's be a long video. Editing this will be a process, but I'm excited for you guys to see this. I'm excited for you guys to agree or disagree with my ranking. Drop yours in the comments. Let me know. Let me know what you think. And yeah, peace out, guys. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, see ya.